Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Over the past few months, the Labour Party has been generous indeed in offering the people of this country regular evidence of its remarkable incompetence. But even by their formidable standards, Mr. Speaker, they have excelled themselves this week. The Prime Minister said some time ago in terms that he prefers Davos to Westminster. But this week, he has left the global hobnobbing and après-ski at the World Economic Forum to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to assist her in her relentless search for growth. Her latest idea is to revive the third runway at Heathrow, a project so toxic to her Labour colleagues that it had been briefed against by the Energy Secretary and publicly rejected by the Mayor of London before it was even pre-announced. As so often, we will have to wait, I'm afraid, for the announcement itself to be made in this House. Meanwhile, the Chancellor's wizard wheeze of the autumn to set up a new Office for Value of Money was publicly rubbished in the most unsparing terms by the chair of the Treasury Committee, who described it as, and I quote, an understaffed, poorly defined organisation set up with a vague agreement and no clear plan to measure its effectiveness. That's from the Chancellor's own Labour colleague, the Right Honourable Member for Hackney South and Shoreditch. Spending reviews are always fraught, and this one will be still more so because the Chancellor has boxed herself in so badly on taxes and spending. What the government thinks is going to be achieved by a couple of dozen hastily assembled newbies and some adolescent management consultants running around, apart from making things even worse, is hard to imagine. And in case we forget, Mr. Speaker, you and I and everyone else in this chamber, and indeed every other taxpayer, is paying for it. Then we had no less a figure than the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies weighing in. He noted that the government has done nothing but talk about growth ever since the last general election, but then noted that at the same time we've seen, and I'm quoting, the imposition of additional employment regulation, further regulation of rental housing, a hike in stamp duty, a big increase in tax on employers, inflation-busting rise in the minimum wage, a refusal to contemplate any serious liberalisation of trade or freedom of movement, and perhaps a clampdown on immigration. And he asked, what is this government's theory of growth? And answered his own question, nobody knows. These are just three examples of the government's absolute lack of seriousness in economics. But as we have just heard in the UQ, there is a serious issue in the area of law which they cannot avoid. Let me just remind the House what's happened. The Attorney-General has been repeatedly asked whether he has or has had a conflict of interest in relation to legal matters that could affect his former client, Gerry Adams. In response, a spokesman for the Prime Minister has highlighted systems to prevent potential conflicts from arising. The Attorney-General himself has cited the Convention that law officers do not discuss their advice to ministers and has disclaimed any connection between his work for Mr Adams and the Legacy Act. As the Honourable Lady, the Solicitor General, just said, the standard they are aspiring to is to be beyond reproach. The problem is that none of this actually addresses the issue of whether or not the Attorney-General in fact recused himself. This does not fall either within the Law Officers Convention or the cab rank principle. He either did do that or he didn't. The problem is made worse when one reflects that this Attorney-General is the first to have come into government directly from private practice in the history of the office, a point completely ignored in the last UQ, and that this practice was not one of the less political areas of law, corporate law or chancery, for example, but squarely in the highly contentious and political area of human rights, some of it in Northern Ireland. There's no reason in law or ministerial practice whatever why the Attorney should not be transparent on this issue, as he has been already in relation to the Legacy Act, and there is a strong public interest that he should do so. His legacy comment proves that he himself concedes the point about the importance of clarity in this area. In his recent letter regarding the former anti-corruption minister, the independent advisor on ministerial standards highlighted the ministerial code, saying that, and I quote, ministers must ensure that no conflict could reasonably be perceived to arise between public duties and private interest. This conflict clearly exists now in relation to the Attorney-General. Does the Leader of the House share my view that we should have a debate on the standards to be applied in these complex cases where there is a potential conflict between the ministerial code, which demands the avoidance of being above doubt, and the actual statements that have been made by the government in defence of the law officer concerned?